Om Sri Krishna Parabrahmane Namaha. I am going to discuss about Bhagavad Gita psychology. So far I have completed around 25 to 30 episodes regarding Bhagavad Gita in all aspects. It is like a well. As long as we are dragging water, it comes out. There is no end for this. This is Ananta Vai Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is an encyclopedia. Every Shastra, every science, every human resources, every arts, every fine arts, every psychology, philosophy, all the things are hidden in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is one of the useful work towards all the generation. Let us discuss after the prayer. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. The Bhagavad Gita is the fountainhead of Eastern psychology, and this commentary is designed to draw out its psychological concepts and make them accessible to all students. These profound insights are intertwined with philosophical concepts, so the task undertaken here is to separate the psychological principles and to explain them their practical application. Here, the word philosophy is a compound of two words, philo and sophia, which means love for knowledge. There are 18 chapters in the Gita. Each describes a different aspect of the process of self-transformation. The aim of Gita is to teach the aspirant how to establish equanimity in his internal life and in his activities in the external world, to help him develop that tranquility within, and to explain the art and science of doing actions skillfully and selflessly. The book aims at helping you to understand your inner potentials. It is not possible to function effectively and harmoniously in the external world, for all the things happen within before they are expressed externally. Lord Krishna modified and simplified the Vedic and Upanishadic knowledge with Bhagavad Gita. Modern psychologists attempt to help the client modify his conscious attitudes and unconscious behaviors, but their analysis lacks the depth and profundity found in the Gita. Most modern therapists do not explore the purpose and meaning of life. They do not go to the root of the problem but analyze it without understanding the fundamental cause. By contrast, Sri Krishna presents philosophical foundation for understanding the purpose of life and the way to live life harmoniously, and he offers Arjuna practical advice on living and coping with the world. The Indian tradition has always revered the Bhagavad Gita as a text marvelous universality, with the ability to throw light on many aspects of individuals' life journey. Further, Its importance is underscored by its preeminence as a source of book of an Indian psychology as seen through the lens of Bhagavad Gita or them studied in opposition with the principle of modern psychology. This study would yield an interesting set of observations about 1. The common ground between the two disciplines. 2. What Indian psychology could learn from modern psychology. And 3. The unique insights that Indian psychology offers, which could contribute to a better understanding and handling of human feelings. Now, the Bhagavad Gita as the epitome of Indian psychology vice versa modern psychology. The traditional view of Bhagavad Gita regards it as one of the Prasthanatrayi, means the threefold scriptures of Hinduism. The other two being the Upanishads and Brahma Sutra. Of these, the Bhagavad Gita is the most widely read and translated. It has been translated into Indian languages translations. Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan regards the Gita as a religious classic than a philosophical treatise, and that is a powerful shaping factor in the renewal of spiritual life and has secured an assured place among the world's greatest scriptures. Psychology was born as a separate discipline in the late 19th century. The early 20th century commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita by Besant and Das, Aurobindo and Balagangadhara Tilak contained no references to psychology at all. The credit for the first exposition of the Bhagavad Gita on the basis of psychophilosophy and psychoanalysis goes to Dr. V.G. Riley, a doctor surgeon by training and a keen researcher of Indian scriptures. Some of the psychological features can be found. 1. Psychology is the study of the person. 2. The person is a composite of consciousness, mind, and body. 3. Consciousness as such is irreducibly different from material objects, including the brain and the mind. 4. Unlike consciousness, mind is physical, though subtle, and is subject to physical laws. 5. Mind does not generate consciousness, it reflects consciousness. 6. The mind-body complex is the instrument of one's thoughts, passion, and action. The mind is different from the brain. Unlike the brain, the mind is subtle in form and composition, and as such, it is non-local in the sense that it is capable of functioning without the normal space-time constraints. The mind, in association with the brain and body, becomes conditioned and is consequently constrained and driven by bodily factors. 9. The prime manifestation of the conditioned mind is the ego. यदा विनियतं चित्तं आत्मन्येवावतिष्ठते निःस्पृहः सर्वकामेभ्यो युक्त इत्युच्यते तदा. The conditioned mind is so biased that the truth it seeks gets clouded and even distorted. Knowing in human condition becomes fallible and behavior of the person becomes imperfect. Mind itself becomes an obstacle if the human quest is for the truth and self-realization. Jnane jneyam parignata trividha karma chodana karanam karma karteti vividah karma sangraha. Mind holding the reins, the person becomes the knower means jnata, the doer karta, and the enjoyer of the fruits of her actions bhokta. The mind in its agentic function acts as the self. It is behind the empirical self as distinguished from the self, Atman or Purusha, which is consciousness such. आशापाशैशतैर्बद्धाः कामक्रोधपरायणाः ईहन्ते कामभोगार्थम् अन्याये नार्थसञ्चयान्. The person in search of identity misconstrues and the mind as her true self and hypostatizes the ego function as the enduring self. Consequently, self-gratification replaces self-realization as the goal of one's endeavor. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manaha manasastu para buddhihi yo buddhehe paratastu saha. The mind may be functionally distinguished into three components: buddhi, ahankara, and manas. Yaya dharmamadharmam cha karyam cha karyameva cha ayatavat prajanati buddhi sa patarajasi. Buddhi, which is commonly translated as the intellect, is an essential and core component of the mind. It is sattva at its best in the human condition. Uncorrupted, it is almost like consciousness. It has the ability to reflect consciousness in its purity. Buddhi is a seat of discrimination and creative action. It is also a seat of memory and depository of karma and storehouse of samskara and vasanas. Unconscious complexes and instinctual tendencies. Ahankara creates the ego sense. It manifests as the me in each person. Identity is its defining characteristic. It is a source of distinction between the self and the other. The manas is like a central processor. Attention is its defining characteristic, filtering and analyzing its other functions. It also acts as an internal sense organ. The mind in its totality is the interfacing instrumentality that is connected at one end with the brain and bodily processes of the person with which it is associated. At the other end, the mind is poised to receive the light of consciousness. Thus, the mind is the surface that reflects consciousness, the ground from which the contents of one's cognition spring, the seat of egoism, and the storehouse of past actions and their effects. Because of such a complexity, the reflections of consciousness in the mind are subjected to bias, distortion, and misinterpretation. The entangled mind becomes unsteady and distracted, exposed to the incoming stimuli in the form of sensory inputs, excited by internally generated imagery and conditioned by samskaras and vasanas. The mind is constantly in a state of flux and is unsteady and prone to turbulence and tension. In one's quest for truth and perfection in being, there is therefore the basic need to make the mind steady and turbulence free. This can be done by disentangling the mind by systematic deconstruction of the ego. There are several ways of doing this. One way is practice of yogic meditation, which results in focused attention, which inhibits distractions. Practice of meditation needs to be accompanied by an attitude of dispassionateness, mean vairagya. The practice of concentration and the cultivation of vairagya are the twin principles guiding the practices of yoga to tame the mind and make it steady. Other ways of deconstructing the ego includes self-surrender by practicing of divine love and devotion and action without attachment to results. When the mind becomes steady and the ego is under control, the person tends to be less biased and be in a position to come closer to truth, experience, consciousness as such, narrow the gap between knowing and being, and have access to a variety of hidden human potentials. The mind in the Indian tradition is the vehicle of one's journey from the ordinary to the extraordinary states of experience, from rational thinking to creative excellence in knowing to transcendental realization of being, from mundane to moral, and from samsara to spirituality. The senses in the Indian tradition are considered more than the physical instruments or the physiological organs. The senses requester the energy patterns emanating from the world of objects and reflect them onto the manas. However, it is manas that triggers the cognitive process. We see Bhagavad Gita delivers with surprising modernity and universality, a comprehensive picture of the human personality, along with the time tested certitude of success. Now, common ground between Indian psychology and Western psychology. The prime phase objectives are similar, example to study the human mind, psyche, human behavior. However, the supererogatory objective of Indian psychology is perfection of existence and moksha. While similarly, though less grandly for Western psychology, it is mental health and solutions to practical human problems. Next, what Indian psychology can incorporate from the Western psychology? Some areas of Indian psychology are eminently suitable for experimental research. Meditation research is a case in point. There is voluminous experimental data collected under controlled conditions, which include investigation of neurophysical correlates of moderative states, influence of meditation on cognitive and other kinds of skills, and benefits of meditation on human health and wellness. There are also other methods of modern psychologists that have relevance to Indian psychology. These include field studies and observations of naturally occurring events. The techniques include surveys, questionnaires, interviews, rating scales, participant observation, and content analysis. Another method that has been successfully put into practice is the single case study. We will use this method to study the impact of the principles of Indian psychology in the lives of B.G. Tilak, Sri Aurobindo, and Mahatma Gandhi later in this article. What Indian psychology offers? Question. Answer. Consciousness is the key concept that distinguishes Indian psychology from all other psychologies. The key to understanding a person is consciousness. Unfortunately, consciousness as conceived by Indian psychology has no room in psychology as studied today or is considered beyond the scope of the subject. Accepting this concept would enhance the scope of current psychology. A very brief exposition is presented below about the impact of Indian psychology as epitomized in the Bhagavad Gita in the lives of Lokmanya Balagangadhara Tilak, Sri Aurobindo, and Mahatma Gandhi. Next, Balagangadhara Tilak. Tilak was one of the great leaders of Indian in the struggle for independence. He was a public intellectual, journalist, and scholar. It is during his imprisonment in Burma that he wrote the Gita Gita Rahasya, a scholarly commentary on the Bhagavad Gita aimed at explaining its secret. It is in this work that he interprets the basic principles of karma. Tilak strongly believed in the karma yoga sthita prajna systems at all. Ideally, a person should attain inner calm by the pure giving the mind of all desires through the realization of the self and between the self and Brahman. One should thereby attain equanimity and malice towards none. Upon attainment of such a state, or should be set an example for others. Through one's own behavior and help everyone around oneself in attaining spiritual progress. When his eldest college going son succumbed to plague, Tilak remained unmoved and remarked to his son-in-law, "Is it not natural, after all, that we would lose some firewood when the whole town is up in flames?" Let us see in the point of view of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo's life and philosophy have many revolutionary and spiritual will and become a possible and faithful. The psychological principles in Sri Aurobindo's writing have served as the inspiration for the renaissance of Indian psychology. Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi point of view. While deeply absorbed in public and political life from 1893 to 1948, Mahatma Gandhi had lived with Bhagavad Gita as his primary source of ethical, moral, and spiritual inspiration. The Bhagavad Gita was a lifetime companion to Gandhi. It was his spiritual reference book. He first read the Sanskrit original. He subsequently translated the Gita himself into Gujarati under the title of Anasakti Yoga. Gandhi spoke and wrote about the Gita very extensively, and his conception of human nature was derived from the Gita. His life was a continuous and constant attempt to live up to the ideal of the Gita. If one would give an appellation to Gandhi's interpretation of the Gita, it would be Anasakti Yoga, means Sthita Prajna. True individuality is reducing oneself to zero. This is the central thesis of interpreting the Gita as Anasakti Yoga. Anashakti is non-attachment. Non-attached action is self-action and delinked from the ego. Delinking the ego from action and deliberate refraining from enjoying the fruit of action lead one to reduce oneself to zero or nothingness. Finally, concluding remarks. Indian psychology becomes a living tradition through the Gita and stands on the shoulders of eminent practitioners and scholars, leading to a better understanding and handling of human existential and its resolution through better informed existential quest. श्रेयकांताय कल्याण निधे निधे दिनाम श्री वेंकट निवासाय श्रीनिवासाय मंगलम मंगलाशासनपरे मदाचार्य पुरोगमे सर्वैश्च पूर्वैराचार्यै सत्कृतायास्तु मंगलम्.